What's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today we are doing the what's next on Filip Hrgovic, the undefeated heavyweight contender and mandatory challenger in the IBF right now, following a 12th round knockout victory of something McKeon. I think that was the guy's name. Honestly, I can't even remember the guy's name. He was an undefeated Australian fighter, and Hrgovic got him out of there. Now, before we get into that, if you guys could smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I try to build my channel up here. Now, back to Hrgovic, excuse me. Hrgovic, didn't look great in this fight, and that's the second fight where he didn't look great. The fight with Zhang, which you have to now consider Zhang was a tougher than expected opponent, especially now that he's knocked out Joe Joyce. They're fighting in a rematch in September. But you really have to show a little bit more respect to Zhang because, as an opponent, but Hrgovic was supposed to be the boogeyman, the guy nobody wanted to fight, the most avoided fighter in the heavyweight division. And he goes in against Zhang, didn't look his best. So people, whatever. But then he fights this guy, McKeon. I looked at his resume. I wasn't too impressed. He hadn't really fought anybody. And you would just think, if you're a top-tier heavyweight like Hrgovic, you're going in hungry, salivating, wanting to prove yourself. And I just don't think he looked that great. Again, that's the second time out. Not looking great. But I also look at it and go, well, I'm not saying they did it intentionally, but you could take a positive from a negative, like so many fighters have done, i.e. Triple G and Daniel Jacobs that finally got the Canelo fight. Not looking that great after looking like a world beater could give opportunities. And I think now it's possible the opportunities are there. Now, we know he's a mandatory challenger, and technically, I believe he's in front of the WBO mandatory. But here's a kicker. I believe Tyson Fury and Alexander Usyk are going to work out a fight and a deal if Usyk defeats Dubois, or Dubois and Fury are going to work out a deal to determine an undisputed champion. I don't believe Hrgovic is going to get a crack at that title, at least until the second half of next year. So the big question is, what's next for Filip Hrgovic now following this victory? Now, let's run through the top 10 and see what the possibilities are. We start with number 1, undefeated WBC champion Tyson Fury. Not likely. Fury is looking for big fights, or he's going after undisputed. He has his sights set on Alexander Usyk following Francis Ngannou in that fight that's taking place in October. It looks like he wants Usyk, and I think they're going to work out a deal. I really do. For a showdown in October. For a showdown early next year, in the first half of next year. So I don't see Hrgovic being in that mix. Next is Alexander Usyk, the undefeated unified heavyweight champ. Now, Hrgovic is mandatory to one of Usyk's belts, the IBF title. But Usyk is fighting Dubois actually tomorrow. If he defeats Dubois, it's likely him and Fury next, and that's a big deal right there. So, I do believe, that it's possible if the Fury fight were to fall through, that Usyk fights Hrgovic, but I really think Usyk wants the big fights too. So, I think Usyk and his team are going to do all in their power as Fury to make that undisputed title clash happen. And so I don't see Hrgovic getting a crack at Usyk next, even though it's possible if the fight falls through and Usyk says fuck it and wants to make another mandatory. Deontay Wilder, not likely. I wouldn't be super surprised. You could sell this as a super mandatory fight, Wilder and Hrgovic. But I'm not sure Wilder, who wants big fights, would be interested in fighting Hrgovic, who's not a big name, and he's also taking a risk. But I do think it's enticing to call for a super mandatory fight, and these two guys possibly fight each other, because Wilder's number 1 in the WBC, and Hrgovic is number 1 in the IBF. Now, do I think that's going to happen? Not likely, but I do think it could happen. So that's where I land on that one. Okay, so next up, Anthony Joshua, AJ. I said in AJ's video that I do think the possibility of AJ and Hrgovic is there because Hrgovic is a number 1 contender. And if AJ and Wilder were to fall through and not happen, I do believe that the possibilities there that AJ and Hrgovic could maybe make a deal. They just fought on the same card. Maybe AJ would be like, hey, I could be number 1 contender if I beat this guy. But I do still think it's kind of high risk for AJ, and there might need to be more at stake. So I'm going to lean towards a no and say I don't see this one going down. Next up is Zhali Zhang, a rematch, the WBO interim champion. You know, this one's very, very enticing, but Zhang would have to beat Joe Joyce. If Zhang beats Joe Joyce and is the WBO interim champion still, and Hrgovic is the IBF mandatory, they could fight in a super mandatory fight. And now listen to this one. This is even bigger in terms of landing an immediate title shot. I've been saying a super mandatory is a great idea when you're waiting around for a unified or especially an undisputed champion. Because this moves you to the front of the line to fight for 2 belts because you're both mandatory challengers. But here's the juiciness of this situation. So Fury and Usyk, if they fight in the first half of the year next year, then Zhang, if he beats Joyce in a rematch, and Hrgovic are going to have to wait longer for their title shots. So why not fight each other again in a rematch? Because the first fight was very close, somewhat controversial, and it went to Hrgovic. But why not fight in a rematch? And then the winner is the mandatory challenger at 2 titles. So the winner of Usyk and Fury would have to fight this guy next. But if he doesn't fight this guy next, if the winner of Fury Usyk doesn't fight the winner of Zhang and Hrgovic, then that winner becomes a 2-belt champion right away. They get upgraded because Hrgovic, if he were to fight Zhang, likely that would be for the IBF interim title as well. 2 interim belts, you become a unified interim champ, and then if Usyk and Fury decide they don't want to fight you and they give up those belts, you become the ruler of half of the heavyweight division in terms of title belts. The future is yours. So for me, I think Hrgovic and Zhang 2 makes a ton of sense next if Usyk and Fury happens for undisputed, and if Zhang beats Joe Joyce in their rematch. So we got to wait and see, but I think it makes a ton of sense. Now, Joe Joyce is next. Same fucking situation. If Joe Joyce defeats Zhali Zhang, super mandatory, Hrgovic is the most avoided fighter, Joyce is most avoided fighter, the winner is in line to become a unified champion if the winner of Usyk Fury next year doesn't want to fight the super mandatory challenger between Joyce and Hrgovic. You stay busy, you fight in a big time fight, earn a shot at 2 belts, 2 of the 4 belts, and if that guy doesn't want to fight you in a mega fight, you were avoided and now you control half of the division. Again, makes a lot of sense. They gotta make these moves and make these big fights happen too. So I think Joe Joyce definitely a possibility for Filip Hrgovic if he beats Zhali Zhang in a rematch. Andy Ruiz Jr. I don't think Ruiz will fight a guy like Hrgovic and take that kind of risk because it's not a big money fight. Ruiz just seems to fluctuate in his weight and just doesn't seem interested in anything but a major fight. You know, he ruined his shot at Fury by asking for too much money. I think part of the reason the Wilder fight didn't happen wasn't just because AJ, I think it was because he wanted too much money. So for me, I really believe Andy Ruiz is not a possibility for Hrgovic. Luis Ortiz. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Ortiz said, fuck it, I'll fight him. But that is Matchroom and DAZN working with the PBC. But Ortiz is constantly in search of an opponent, and Hrgovic is too. So I think it could happen. Little on the less likely because of the promotions, but I do think it's possible because both these guys are avoided, and they're both still top 10 fighters. Dillian Whyte, maybe if Whyte wants to really throw his name in there and take a crack at, you know, getting in line for a world title shot again, he's going to have to go through a guy like Hrgovic. And if Hrgovic has to wait for Fury, and that super mandatory situation doesn't work out against the winner of Zhali Zhang and Joe Joyce, then maybe Hrgovic and Whyte, because they're both promoted by the same guy and the same company, maybe they could get together for a showdown and see what happens. Especially since Hrgovic hasn't looked that great. I think Whyte might take a risk and take that fight. And finally, Daniel Dubois, the WBA regular champ. He's fighting Alexander Usyk next for the unified title, actually tomorrow. If he were to pull off that upset and become the IBF champ, I think he's going to fight Fury next. You know, but the possibility's there if the Fury fight were to fall through for Dubois, that he has to make a mandatory against Hrgovic. I doubt it, but we'll see. So for Filip Hrgovic, anything's possible. I don't think he's getting a title shot next, but I really believe the winner of Zhang and Joe Joyce make a ton of sense, and I think the Dillian Whyte fight are also possibilities in terms of top 10 guys. Kind of outside possibilities, but still could happen, are Luis Ortiz, AJ, and Wilder, if the Wilder and AJ fight falls through. So we'll see what goes down, but that's it. That's my what's next on Filip Hrgovic, the undefeated IBF mandatory heavyweight challenger in the world right now, after a 12th round TKO victory. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.